Yeah. Another thing that I was thinking about, and this kind of gets into the Mozart effect that I want to talk about with you.
Yeah.
But this whole thing with being in control of the music you're listening to, it makes me wonder, and studies are curious too, as to whether it's the music that is creating this productivity, or if you think it's music that is increasing your mood and thus increasing your productivity. Like, obviously music has an effect on us in a positive way that it will make us productive. I don't disagree with that, but I'm curious if you think the ability to be able to make that decision that, like, I'm going to listen to music at work is a larger component than the music itself as to why you'd be in a better mood and be more productive.
So you're saying the choice or the music? Are you saying? Oh, wow.
In a roundabout way, the music or the choice to listen.
See, now this gets into something interesting, in my opinion, where I feel like a fair amount of American workers complain about the lack of control they have in their jobs, complain about the monotony of their day-to-day tasks, complain about how they're just kind of upset with what they're doing. What if it is the choice? Well, that's like, I think it could be. Like, I'm kind of riding this mental wavelength with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there was the Mozart Effect, which is this study that came out in 1993, I believe, from Frances Raucher. Apologies if I got that wrong. But essentially, I think she had one group play 10 minutes of Beethoven's Piano Sonata to 36 college students. And then she had another group that listened to silence and another group that listened to rock music. After doing that, they had them do these activities that would reflect a certain part of your IQ score that is testing your spatial temporal cognitive abilities. I don't know. I think it was like something about like, it sounded like origami and like escaping a maze. It was some absurd tasks.
Okay.
But essentially, since they did it right afterward, they found that the group that listened to Mozart was like scoring well above the other groups, all the other variables being accounted for. They scored way above the rock group and the group that listened to nothing before doing these tasks. So after that, there was this huge wave of craze about listening to Mozart before taking the SAT. I think I read that like Tennessee and Alabama were like handing out like free like Beethoven like
at the universities.
I think at the high school level, because it was for the SAT.
Okay.
They were publicly handing out like, I don't know, what would it be, like tapes back then, 1998, whatever. But they would hand it out so the kids could listen to that and improve their SAT score. And obviously that's deviating from what the study showed. But it came across later, and I think in 1998 as well, there was this funny titled study called Mozart Effect, Schmozart Effect.
I like that.
Where it essentially was a meta-analysis of this study, and it found that there was no real correlation between listening to Mozart and increasing your IQ for some short amount of time. The root of it was actually the fact that it increased their mental state. It increased their mood more than rock music or silence did.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that second study hit it on the head. Based on what I was researching, from what I found, the whole thing about performance a lot of the time is the mood shift rather than I just can't imagine it's some sort of magic thing that the violin does to the brain, or whatever the orchestra instruments were. Right.
So then it's like that study seemed to be the first shift for me, where it seems less the music and more the choice. And then we find these other studies where you're trying to create some auditory cocoon where you just like have created a space where it's your choice. It's like, this is the environment I want for my workspace.
I'm wondering if when it comes to them like showing Mozart or whether it be Beethoven, whatever classical music they want to choose, I have a feeling that the results regarding what the people's performance would be like would be different if it was during than just before. Do you get what I'm saying? Like during.
That's a good point, because we are more talking about what you're doing during work, whereas this was before they did those tests. But I still think the same would hold true, that like being able to have some choice where you're listening to Beethoven rather than listening to silence would increase your mood before or during that activity.
I agree. I think that mood is a big help. However, I'm just you know what I think makes for an interesting, maybe this is just me just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff together, but in your opinion, would it be crazy to say that the reason Mozart and classical music gets such a positive rap for what it can do while you're studying is because it is the genre of music without lyrics that's closest to sort of ambient noise with consistent sounds and consistent ways that the music's flowing. It's softer. All of these different things that we know about. That's why music, or that those are the types of music that can do well for you if you are doing something mental.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that it's just the way that the style of music is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the same is true for jazz too, which I think is got more of a common place than classical music in the productivity realm at this point, I bet. I mean, at least for you.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely has to do with the lack of lyrics and just kind of the general agreeableness of the sounds. You're not going to get any distortion or weird like drum switch up patterns or whatever it may be.
Exactly. Unless it's like a really big ballad symphony Beethoven thing where it was in the, I took choir and stuff for a long time. I'm going to try to remember the genre. There was like different eras of classical music. I don't know if it was Gothic. I'm trying to remember. But there was a genre in the classic after it. Classical's overused, right? This is genres that kept going.
Right.
When I feel like it could have been like not Valentine. I'm blanking, but there was a movement in music where it went from classical and what you imagine classical to be very whatever to, I mean, just imagine, I think it's Beethoven's Fifth where it's like, hung, 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 dun, 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 dun. Like, but there's like a lot of really loud changes and forte, just a lot of forte, a lot of pianissimo right after it. So the quietest and then the most loud possible sound of music. Yeah. So I feel like if someone were to overuse the term classical, they could accidentally listen to some classical music that in like modern terminology, since it's confusing and I'm blanking on the term. If they were to go and go to that genre that like kind of went past the original classical and then they were to listen to it, they would have an awful time studying. Oh
yeah. I mean, think about like Richard Strauss, like I always think about this from like, I think it's Jurassic Park where it's like the dun 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 dun. Like you couldn't study that. The
third of this podcast is us attempting to make the noises.
I was doing a little doo-wop over here. Hey, but to tie that to philosophy real quick, that's called Thus Spoke Zarathustra from Richard Strauss was inspired by Friedrich Nietzsche to write that. So a little philosophy plug.
Yeah, but I just feel like
you're certainly right though. I mean, even outside of lyrics, even with just music that has no lyrics, you need some kind of agreeableness. You don't need that kind of dynamic, super low stuff and then super like crazy, like, I don't know, you don't want anything that's going to get the adrenaline too high. And I think that's kind of where I like the whole video game noise too. It was like, at least it's consistent. Like, I don't feel like it goes a ton of places unless it's like, I don't know, I can't speak for all video games generally, but like at least with like my conception of Warcraft music, which is Skyrim.
It's got a similar aura to it the whole time.
Yeah, it's just very consistent, very kind of dull and undertone-ish,
Yeah, and that's probably something that a lot of people can relate to. A lot of the people in the video game world, people who self-proclaim nerds, would probably say that they vibe with that when they're doing homework, which sounds weird, but apparently it works, and that's just funny to me, and I'm happy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I had a question for you about, your taste in music, and I think it's interesting how we are different in the sense of auditory versus, I'd say I'm more auditory in regards to learning versus you're probably more reading and visual, right?
Definitely.
Okay. Do you find it difficult when you are trying to learn something overall to have like music going in general? Like, would you listen to one of these albums you're trying to like decipher ever while you're also trying to do any sort of mental work? Has this ever like happened?
Oh, no. I feel like me listening to an album, it was easy in high school. I would crank albums while I was in the car driving because it's just
God, yeah.
It's going back to that idea of how much cognitive space you have to take up. I would say that, I don't know, me listening to an album with real intention is equivalent to probably talking to like half a person. I could have a conversation with another person and I'm at like 1.5. So it's like I'm getting half of each, right? Roughly. But I think the only tasks that I would do now is, I don't know, walking, getting groceries, cleaning my room. And maybe it's interesting because you can get a lot of like mathematical or more, I don't know, monotonous. Not to say math is monotonous. It's very critical sometimes.
No, not words.
Yeah. Kind of like non-word. Yeah. If I'm not like reading something else, I'd sound like I have two different internal dialogues going along. I'm just listening to the lyrics.
Yeah, this is something I was thinking. Because there's something I'd love more in a lot of different tasks that I'm trying to do that are productive. That there's something I would love more than to somehow take these things I want to hear, these things I want to listen to, this music that I enjoy, and bring it into tasks that do require mental activity, because I think I maybe am wording it wrong. If you want to see this episode or any other episode of the Rise Productive podcast, make sure to go and check the show out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else that you can find podcasts today.